Hi, my name is Robert Wallace. Uh, what do I do? Well, I go around and I help people get over struggles that I've already gone through, struggles that I've gone through the hard way, struggles that I've overcome the hard way, and struggles that I've overcome the easy way. And I grew up in Michigan. It's cold up there. They say the north is the direction of survival because of those elements. And my living conditions weren't always optimal. We struggled, my family, like a lot of the world. In fact, I don't know if you knew this, but two-thirds of the world live on less than $1 a day. And so we take for granted even what we have in the United States, for instance, presupposing this is where you're at when you're watching this, and when we're broke. And so going through the process of surviving, getting through the requirements of life, satisfying my authorities, my parents, the schools, things like that, finding myself disconnected from people in my life, friends and things like that, not having all good situations and circumstances work out. Now, a lot of people have those work out and they confront problems later down the road. Some of us have those problems early on in life, and we can either benefit by later on coming to a deeper understanding of who we are, or we can ignore the call for these lessons and we can actually stay stagnant and we can grow and be born into a situation and never change. Well, I couldn't allow that to happen. I was a peculiar kid. I was the class clown generally. I liked to make jokes, I liked to fool around, not take life too seriously. In fact, I never liked school. I still don't. I have opinions about the general school system that I think a lot of people share in terms of its effectiveness and how it positions a person for the future, because there's specific information that it's missing. And once I started to get into this information through a series of unfortunate circumstances, I started to realize that the true power and what I was looking for was found in my thought life. It was found in that place that I had made a playground of, but also a disaster of within myself. And as I started to clean that up, I started to get better results. So living there, I moved to Texas and I experienced some bigger city circumstances that I was unaccustomed to prior. And then I moved to Florida where I went to school. I went to school for computer animation, and I met a friend there. I decided, you know what, I'm not going to pursue computer animation anymore. And I moved to Tallahassee with my friend. Well, we had a lot of fun, okay? But I wasn't addressing what was important in my life. I wasn't completing big goals. I wasn't continuing my education per se. And I didn't really know where I was going, but I knew that I needed to be somewhere and that I was going to make it. At least that was my inner hope. Now, at that time, I didn't realize, that's kind of an unjustified thought when you don't have the tools. But it led to me desiring the tools. So I lost all my possessions in Tallahassee, unfortunately. Long story, but I ended up in Michigan again, where I started, back with my mom and living at her house. And, I was really disheartened because, I'd been in Texas and Florida, and I loved the weather so much. I hated the cold, and here I was stuck back up in Michigan. Now, it's great I'm here, spending time with my mom and all of this sort of thing, but it was just a step back in a big way. And so I realized I needed to make a breakthrough. I was up in the attic. That's where I set up my room at that time, watching TV, and I saw this 14-year-old kid graduating out of high school. Now, this is about 9 years ago, 10 years ago. And I saw this kid graduating out of college. He was graduating out of college. And I said, how is this possible? He was one of those savants. He was so smart. And I said, here, I'm a college dropout. So look at how much of my life I've wasted, So at this point, I'm thinking there's got to be a way to catch up, because as of right now, I already feel like I've thrown my life in the trash. Now I'm, just fresh into my 20s, and I'm already thinking my life is ruined, basically. Now, in reality, I suppose, reality, we could die tomorrow, but in one sense, I was relatively young. On the other hand, I had still wasted plenty of years. Being 20 years old is still 20 years of what do you got to show? So I prayed, and I said, God, I said, there's got to be a way for me to catch up. Please help me catch up. And, the kind of person I am, folks, is I want an instant solution. I want a magical solution. I want to ask, for a bunch of knowledge and just have it imparted into my head and just know stuff. But I wanted a quick, unrealistic solution. Well, it wasn't too long after that, actually within a week or so, that I found the movie The Secret. Now, at first I found it online, and I saw a trailer for it, and I'm up in this attic, and I've got this internet connection. It wasn't all that fast, but I'm going to watch it. Saw the trailer, and I found an online copy, and I watched it. So I was making minimum wage at that time, and I decided, and I didn't have a car or anything, and I was walking down the road to a CVS. It's a pharmacy. And I went there one day, and I was looking around, probably going to waste money as usual for my minimum wage job. And I saw that movie, The Secret. Now, I have to get that movie. When I saw that online, I am going to get that movie in my life. I didn't know where, though. I figured, who sells it? I haven't really noticed it. Well, I saw a single copy sitting on their shelf. That DVD was $30. Now, at the time, I was thinking $30 is a lot of money, because I'm minimum wage, On the other hand, I knew that if I didn't buy it, that my life would probably not change at all. So I hid it. I hid the movie because I knew I had to come back because I didn't have that kind of money right then. So I walked all the way back, miles back home. Went to work. By the end of the week, I had my paycheck, and I took it, and I went and bought that movie, which I hid. I found it. I was so excited. And a portable, one of the small DVD players. Took it up into my attic room, plugged it in, and I said, I'm going to watch this over and over and over forever. That's what I started to do. I'd watch it 5-6 times a day, over and over and over. Well, as I started to get into it, I started realizing, okay, I got questions, and I would get more and more answers as I would keep watching it. But I had to branch out into expanding myself as time went on, because the results that I were getting were great and everything, but they were small, and they weren't really the kind of big ideas that I had promised, in the film. So I started reading books on the subject. I started finding all sorts of books that were written by all sorts of authors throughout the course of time, and this started breaking me into all sorts of psychology, philosophy, metaphysics, spirituality, religion, and as I started to collect all of this sort of knowledge and go through programs, and picking up programs like crazy, I was trying to find another avenue to understand this information from. And I knew that if I could do it, then I could make that quantum leap that I had prayed for. Now, all of a sudden, where I was and the way I was positioned in life, I didn't have to stay limited by my past failure. And I could visualize and make this quantum leap forward. So I continued to do that. I started to expand in every which direction, spending loads and loads of money on all sorts of solutions, getting just obsessed with the subject matter. You may be also obsessed with the subject matter, knowing that it may resemble a door of freedom out for you. And it does. It absolutely does. This is a way that you can relate to your universe, your creator, yourself, your hope, and promise for a better tomorrow, and in a way that will actually bring something about. So there's a lot of pessimism around the subject, and I heard it. But you know what? It's one of those things that I think if it connects with you, it just connects with you. And if it doesn't, critics are dime a dozen. Believing in it, though, that's something that only you can do. I could sit here and tell you why it works, which I do. I spend a lot of time telling people why and how it works. But if it doesn't become a personal decision of yours. So anyway, in my personal life, in my journey, this brought me into a place where I began to see everything as a positive. Every negative thing that happened was positive because it happened to me and it told me of a correction. So when something bad would happen, I would be grateful for it. I hurt myself, I'm grateful for it. Something doesn't work out, I'm grateful. How is it that I was grateful for it? Because I realized that if that didn't happen, I would not know to reposition myself, to look at my thinking. How was I thinking and feeling? And these are actually the authorities, the teachers, and the school of life. And it's because I understood the curriculum generally that I started to make more use out of this. But of course, you have to go in, you have to study, you have to read constantly. Read every single day something, watch everything you can get your hands on, but apply it. And I find that it's a lot easier in some sense to apply what you read than what you hear. So that led me to write a book, which is being edited and finished right now, eventually to help people in that area. But you want to make sure that you yourself are reading. Just as a side note, this is what I figured out, that you're reading, but you're also watching, you're listening, and because I love the media element so much and I do so much of it, that's exactly why I'm moving into this format. And what began to happen was I started to see opportunities where there was none. So at one point I wanted to travel a lot, and I moved under by an airport, and it wasn't in the good part of town at all, but there was this airport, and I remember I had my dad and my brother and my stepmom over, and the planes were flying overhead and the whole apartment was shaking. It's like, is this thing gonna fall? That was the question. And because of my mindset, I said, well, this is absolutely amazing because I love the idea of airplanes and traveling about. So what I'll do is every time a plane is leaving or I hear this rumble, that'll prompt me to go out into my little shared patio and look up and say, I'm leaving to a new destination. And I visualized myself sitting on that plane and we're flying away. And every time one was coming in to go for a landing, I'd visualize myself just having returned from a trip. And where did I come from this time? And that every single time a plane was going by, it was actually the cue to say, hey, where am I going or coming from right now? And keeping that up in the forefront of my mind was actually speeding it up. It wasn't but a matter of time that these things came to pass. And my request to travel all over the world was granted. I requested through the law of attraction, through prayer, many, many things, people, places, circumstances that had manifested, the kind of relationship that I wanted manifested, the kind of information that I needed would be there for me. And so I was able to navigate my way through life just based on this information. So much so that I became regarded as lucky, that I became, and that's kind of the sad thing, honestly. I think this goes right here, that people can think that after so many years of trying to apply this sort of information, the fact that it happens, that a person can be lucky. What it is it's evidence. But the evidence for the thing not hoped for was the faith that I had all the way. And it doesn't bother me that people think I'm lucky. That's still considered a positive thing, right? But it makes me more sad, because what it says to a person is that there's something called coincidence, which we don't believe in, that chooses some people to sometimes put in a lucky position, and other times you're out of luck, and it's just the hands of destiny, and you have no contributing factor. And what all this information taught me was, even right from the get-go, from the Bible, we are taught how to pray and how to get an answer. And once you master just small requests, and you master obeying and feeling, once you start maybe awakening to the spirit within, all of a sudden it becomes a very five-dimensional sort of situation you're in. And so it's important that you are aspiring and that you're studying, but it's also important that you take into account that you are not merely lucky, but receiving whatever it is that you're asking for, and good or bad. And so this is actually it's a powerful piece of information, and it's the accountability factor that as I started to rise up to, I started to take quantum leaps in my development, accepting criticism, but it's really what it comes down to in terms of the criticism and growing from it. You've got to be your own worst critic. I'm not saying that you should bully and beat yourself up, though sometimes we have a tendency to do that, but whoever judges themselves won't be judged. There won't be a necessity or need to judge themselves. If you correct and chastise yourself, who needs to come and chastise that man? I mean, that's a biblical principle. A lot of people, though, only want to wait until they're chastised, or were slack concerning their expectations of themselves while they're strict on others, when we should really be, if anything, slack and unjudgmental and those making their way, while we ourselves are strict and hold ourselves to a higher discipline, and we use ourselves as the light for others, and we can guide by that sort of influence and that evidence. So now, my life went from out there in Michigan and traveling and struggling and going through many hardships and being impoverished and things like this in different ways, to getting an insight into the way the universe works, enjoying life in a happy format with somebody that I love, seeing the world in a way that I've never seen it before, all starting from the mind place, starting from here, and then these people and places and circumstances and all this can come into your world. In fact, one of the things that I've learned is that, two things. The first thing is that God